Welcome to this detailed explainer. You know, we live in an era where the word burnout gets thrown around all the time. It's that heavy, crushing weight of endless responsibilities, that creeping feeling that you're just a tiny cog in a massive machine, entirely drained of your own humanity. Well, what if that feeling wasn't just a metaphor? What if it literally transformed you?
Seriously, have you ever woken up feeling completely exhausted, so alienated from yourself and your own life that you felt more like an insect than a person? If you have, you are definitely not alone. It means you've got a little bit of Gregor Samsa inside you. Today we're dissecting one of the most famous and, honestly, perhaps most deeply misunderstood stories of the 20th century.
Okay, let's dive into this. Kafka kicks off the novella with this absolute gut punch of an opening line. As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a gigantic insect. Notice what's missing there. There is literally no panic in the narration. There's this stark, almost jarring contrast between Franz Kafka's dry, emotionless, clinical writing style and the utterly absurd tragedy of a guy just waking up as a giant bug. Kafka delivers this world-shattering, impossible event with the mundane tone of a Tuesday weather report.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with who Franz Kafka is, run through a brief plot summary, explore the themes of family and isolation, look at space, time, and symbols, uncover a wild twist about the bug with wings, and finally discuss what this all means for burnout today.
All right, Section 1, Who is Franz Kafka? To really get why our main guy, Gregor, is so isolated, we first have to dissect the rather tragic life of his creator, because as you'll see, the fiction really doesn't fall far from reality here.
Kafka lived a deeply oppressive life. Honestly, much of it felt like a literal prison to him. Born in 1883, he was dominated by a tyrannical father, Hermann, who constantly guilt-tripped him for not suffering as much as he did in his own youth. To make a living, Kafka worked this incredibly mundane daytime job dealing with insurance documents, saving his real passion, his writing, for the dead of night. In 1917, he was diagnosed with tuberculosis, which tragically claimed his life at just 40 years old in 1924. And here is a wild fact. We almost never got to read this masterpiece. Kafka actually asked his best friend, Max Brod, to burn all of his work after he died. Thankfully for us, Brod completely broke that promise.
Let's move to Section 2, Brief Plot Summary, and see how this all builds into the tragic arc of our protagonist, Gregor Samsa.
So, the story essentially breaks down into three parts. In part 1, Gregor wakes up as this massive insect. And his biggest concern? It's not that he's a bug. It's that he's going to be late for work, while his family and his boss are outside his door totally panicking. In part 2, his sister initially tries to feed him, but she brings him rotting food. His mother literally faints at the sight of him, and his father violently drives him back into his room by throwing apples at him, getting one lodged right in his back. Finally, in part 3, a neglected and wounded Gregor accidentally scares away 3 lodgers who were renting a room, costing the family money. Realizing he's nothing but a burden now, Gregor quietly dies in the night. And the family's reaction? Pure relief. They leave the apartment and go on a joyful, sunny picnic.
Which brings us to Section 3, Family and Isolation. The true transformation in this story isn't just physical, it's deeply emotional, and it reveals the completely toxic dynamics of the Samsa family.
There is a totally devastating contrast at the heart of this story. Before the transformation, Gregor was the sole breadwinner, just slaving away to pay off his parents' debt. Yet we find out his father was secretly hoarding some of Gregor's earnings. The second Gregor can't work anymore, he instantly becomes a despised parasite. On the flip side, we have his sister, Great. Initially, she's super supportive, but as time passes, she evolves into this ruthless new head of the family, ultimately deciding they just need to get rid of him. Researchers often draw parallels here between Great and Gert's character Marguerite, as well as Kafka's own sister Atla, who initially supported Kafka against their father before their relationship totally fractured.
Section 4, Space, Time, and Symbols. Now that we've got a handle on the people, let's shift our focus to the abstract elements that really elevate this novella into a masterpiece of absurdist literature. Because in Kafka's world, physical space heavily mirrors psychological torment. Ever heard the word chronotope? It's basically how time and space intersect in a story.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how trapped Gregor is. His bedroom is literally a crossroad in the dead center of the apartment. It connects to his sister's room, his parents' room, and the living room. People constantly have to walk through his space. This architectural setup symbolizes his complete lack of boundaries and privacy. He is surrounded on all sides by demands and judgment.
The timing of this story is equally wild, featuring a very twisted biblical timeline. Gregor is reborn as a bug right around Christmas Eve, taking on the heavy suffering of his family, almost like a savior figure. He then dies right around Easter. But here's the absurdist catch. There's no resurrection. In this universe, Kafka is really echoing that Nietzschean concept that God is dead. There is no higher moral compass swooping in to save Gregor, just a cold, completely indifferent reality.
Building on those twisted religious symbols, notice the recurring motif of the number 3 throughout the story. The novella has 3 distinct parts, Gregor's room has 3 doors, and near the end, 3 lodgers move into the apartment. These lodgers are described almost like mechanical beings with these fake-looking beards, and they act as a dark, twisted inversion of the biblical 3 magi visiting a savior. Instead of bringing gifts, they bring judgment, they take over the space, and eventually, they just flee in disgust.
And speaking of biblical imagery, we definitely have to talk about the apple. When Gregor escapes his room, his father bombards him with apples, lodging one deep into his back. This isn't just some random piece of fruit, it's a super powerful symbol of the wrath of God the Father, raining down punishment. It inflicts a rotting, fatal wound. Meanwhile, his mother fainting at the mere sight of him? Well, as a quick aside, that's a surprisingly honest relationship test right there. If you turn into a giant bug and your family just passes out instead of helping you, you might want to reevaluate your support system for sure.
Within his room, there's an often overlooked symbol, the couch. Gregor is constantly scurrying under the couch to hide. It serves as his only true refuge, his ultimate protection from his family's cruel gaze. Compare that dark, dusty hiding spot to the final symbol of the novella, the bright, shining sun during the family's picnic at the end. That sun represents the family's unbothered, totally optimistic, and entirely guilt-free future, shining brightly only after they've left Gregor to die in the dark.
Section 5. The Bug with Wings. Okay, we've talked a lot about what the bug represents. But what exactly is the bug? For this, we turn to a really fascinating literary twist provided by another famous author, Vladimir Nabokov, who had a huge passion for entomology, which is the study of insects.
Nabokov was heavily invested in the biological reality of Kafka's creation, and he deduced that Gregor was absolutely not a cockroach, or cucaracha, as some Spanish translations incorrectly suggest. As Nabokov points out, a cockroach is flat. Gregor, based entirely on the text, is convex. He's rounded on the top and the bottom. He's described as being about 1 meter long, so roughly the size of a dog, with strong mandibles and legs powerful enough to literally turn a key in a lock. He is a giant beetle.
But Nabokov's most brilliant observation goes beyond just the shape of the bug. So the crucial point is, as a beetle of this specific type, Gregor actually had wings hidden underneath his rigid back shell. He possessed the physical capability to fly away from his miserable room, to escape his oppressive family, and to literally elevate himself. But because he was so trapped in his own mindset, so beaten down by his life, he simply never realized he had the power to fly.
Section 6. Meanings, Depression, and Burnout. This profound revelation of undiscovered wings perfectly ties into the final section of our explainer. Why does this bizarre story still resonate so deeply with us over a century later? Well, because it's an incredibly versatile metaphor. Let's look at how this story can be read. A Freudian lens sees it as the manifestation of severe father issues. Kafka's own real-life trauma just bleeding onto the page. A socioeconomic read views Gregor as the exploited worker under capitalism. The very moment you stop producing value, society discards you. A meta-literary approach sees Gregor as Kafka himself, the isolated artist completely misunderstood by his pragmatic family. But perhaps the most relatable lens today is the psychological one. The Metamorphosis is this brilliant, raw depiction of modern burnout, deep depression, and even body dysmorphia. It's what happens when you pour so much of yourself into the demands of others that you wake up one day and don't even recognize the creature you've become.
Which brings us right back to you and those hidden wings under the shell. Kafka's masterpiece forces us to look in the mirror. When the crushing weight of work, family expectations, and daily life threatens to turn you into a mindless insect just crawling on the walls, you have a choice. Will you remain trapped in the dark room of your own making, completely unaware of your potential?
Or will you realize you have wings, break out of your shell, and try to live on?